Hi, everybody. Rob LaRocca here, and glad to have your attention. Thank you for tuning in. We're excited to welcome the master of disaster on the sonic low end of the sound spectrum, the BASSASSIN, the apex predator himself, Larry Longtree Langley. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you very much, Rob. Love that intro, man. That's awesome. Thanks for having me on the show tonight, man. It's a pleasure to be here, and all positive thoughts and prayers out there to uh, my fellow humanity in these trying times. We're very happy to be here and provide some sort of entertainment for you this evening.
Very good, sir. Yes, definitely, thinking good thoughts. And I feel like if we can try to keep our spirits up, that our physical forms will follow that example. You and I can help with that. So, sir, let's get right into it. I'm excited. I want to tear into this subject. I'm really, it's going to be edifying for me on a personal level, and I think everybody else will appreciate it too. I'd like to start out, if you could tell a little bit about yourself, specifically concerning your history as a musician, how you started, how you got into bass, how that turned into rock, and just whatever you can give us from the past that people like, including myself, with which they might not be familiar.
Cool, man. Great question. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. And when I was a child of about 2 years old, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, Eunice Colvin, who's the mother of my mother, Karen White. And she, watched us quite a bit, and we probably got on her nerves a lot. So when I found myself sitting in front of a organ with a chord chart in front of me, and that was a grandma's way of saying, hey, do something constructive. And she helped me along, and that was really my start, was playing organ at grandma's house. When I got into elementary school, they did have a music program, and so trumpet was my first instrument. I think you and I have that in common. And I played trumpet probably 5-6 years, I want to say. And when I got into high school, I did marching band, jazz band, freshman year, sophomore year, transferred schools, did jazz band for a semester. And, I kind of fell out of it. Really, about that point, I had discovered girls and marijuana. So, life changed for me a little bit at that point. But parents had been divorced. I was with my mom, didn't have a lot of money. So, at 14 years old, I had a full-time job. And during that process, we had moved to the north side, and I was going to Broad Ripple High School, and I met a couple characters there. One was Sean Young, and one was Justin Lynch. And, we became buds. Now, Justin was the reigning champion of the world guitar player at Broad Ripple High School. And he also held the position that I coveted as the bass player for the jazz band. But, I couldn't touch him because he'd been playing since he was 2 or 3 years old on the same instrument. So he was, phenomenal. But that really evolved into a great friendship, and lots of other people involved there. But it eventually evolved into Sean buying a drum kit. And within about 30 days of him doing that, I bought a bass guitar, and we started learning music, and eventually got Justin to come over and jam with us. And it went really well. First session went great. He had written a song called Pay the Pharaoh, and it's a great metal song. Metallica was hitting real hard back then. And, we were bloodthirsty metalheads, and he brought us a great song, and, that started that whole deal. And, I've been playing the bass guitar ever since. It's been a great experience as a it's a conduit for the release of energies, whether, at different times of my life, it's been an occupation, it's been a passion. There's times when it's been a hobby, but it's always allowed me to express myself artistically. So very happy all of those things happened. And that's kind of the makeup of the beginning of my music career.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. Something that I'd like to touch on, that you mentioned, is Justin Lynch. And I was wondering if you could tell people a little bit about your relationship with Justin, how he might have been influential for your music career. And I know that you and Sean and he were all very close, almost to the point of being brothers. Could you tell us a little bit more about you and Justin and Sean and that whole scene, how it got started? What were all the crazy stuff that you guys did together, and just anything you can remember about that. I think people would really enjoy hearing it.
Well, Justin was really good. And Sean and I, although we knew music, he was on drums and I was on bass. We weren't very good. We were brand new to the instruments and just learning from the ground up. And so he was basically our teacher, and did demonstrate a lot of patience, getting us up to a level. But I mean to tell you, within about 6 months, man, we were pretty good. At least we thought we were. But we would go, we recorded a couple times and played some shows, and we got a really, really good response, man. And it just kept growing. We did have a good friend of ours, Lim Wong, took on a role of sound engineer. Same deal. He'd never been a sound engineer before in his life, but he had some cash. He went out and bought the gear, and he taught himself how to use it. And there were some learning curves there, but that ended up being the core for the first recording, which was done at home on a Fostex 4-track 1/4-inch tape machine. I mean, you couldn't overdub or anything. Everything had to be done right the first time. We recruited Jake Corbin on vocals, and we still jam with Jake today. He's the vocalist for Mercy Kill. So, it's really been an awesome thing. But with Justin, was always the best player in the room, and he's been in multiple projects. And if you ask anybody, they'll say that exact same thing. I mean, if there was an accordion sitting in the room, he probably hadn't played an accordion before, but within about 20 minutes, he's going to put you down on an accordion track. I mean, he just had the natural talent and feel for the physics of playing a musical instrument and the ear to be able to hear the notes and all that stuff. And sadly enough, it was right about a year ago that Justin passed away, and it's had a huge impact on all of us who never really lost a brother in music that close before. And so a lot of great things came out of that, and including the Alien Propulsion Technology Project. I think got a huge boost out of that, because it did come from the same culture and era out of the Broad Ripple scene of the early 90s. So, obviously a huge influence. I think about him every day, and I always try and give 110% for the very fact that and he much did the same. If you were tracking or playing a live show, you were getting everything, no matter what. No matter what the conditions were, good or bad, you go all out, above and beyond every time. So that's basically that. We missed you, Justin Patrick Lynch. Rest in peace, brother.
Indeed, and it was a tremendous loss to the Broad Ripple music community. The passing of Justin, we're very sorry about that. I wonder, speaking of that, I wonder if you could take us back, and let's go back to the favorite time of our lives. I'm see if you can you possibly tell people what it was like. So you're a teenager, you're working basically, you're almost out on your own at 14, you're forming this band. What happened with that? What was that like? Fictional tensions. I mean, that's the name is interesting. The people in it are amazing. They're iconic. If if you grew up around the Broad Ripple scene, those are big names. Can you take us back and just give us an idea of what that was like forming the band? You're young, having a good time, etc.
Well, Rob, probably the best way to describe that is that we were running wild. There were no rules. I mean, I don't know. I moved out of the house. I think I just turned 17, moved out, was dumb enough to lease an apartment right next to the high school I went to. And so, basically, I would go the first couple of periods and see what girl would be willing to come back to the apartment. And, I had a neighbor that would get me beer and sell me pot. And so it just turned into big party scenes. As a matter of fact, the school kicked me out after about 6 weeks of that. And I had to go to night school to graduate. But it kind of led to this culture, where we were able to hang out, even though we were still minors basically, but we were able to hang out and, learn life. And that really developed into the music culture. I mean, I think it naturally does. A lot of the older influences we had back then, tuned us up to stuff like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, Iron Maiden, Rush, and so those were great influences. I really feel like that era of music, was a jumpstart for a lot of people in my age group. But it gradually led to us all getting instruments and playing and forming a band and writing songs and coming up with ideas of our own. And it just kept branching out and growing and growing. And the parties got more crazy, and we experimented with a lot of different drugs back then. I am proud to say that that circle of friends that we had, we never really messed with like heroin or cocaine or anything like that, but we probably did more than our fair share of acid, and certainly smoked pot like it was going out of business. And Sean and I could drink a case of beer together at 16 years old, no problem. And we still occasionally do that to this day. And eventually we started recording and had a product to market, and we started getting gigs, and the culture was good, man. It was fun for everybody. We always had a good crowd, and really a lot of the same people, and even to this day, those same people we keep in touch with. It was really a scene more than it was the band. We were just fortunate, I guess, to be the band, but that's how that all came up. And over the years, I don't think we realized it, but we were really able to craft our trade, to the point to where now as a middle-aged adult, I can go into pretty much any music scenario confident that I'm going to play well, whether it be a blues band or a jazz band or a rock band or a metal band. And, obviously that's where it started, and that's the preferred method. It's funner. The one thing I'll say about metal music that, some people like it, some people don't, but as the player, to me, it's among the funnest to play because it's very challenging. The music's very fast. There are a lot of scales involved, a lot of tempo changes, a lot of key changes, and to be able to successfully negotiate your part, it's kind of like trying to get an Olympic gold medal. I mean, if you nail the whole thing all at the same time, then you really have a sense of accomplishment. You really feel like you got it done, man. You worked hard to even be able to try that. So one of the things that really has been the appeal to playing metal music and being in metal bands is that challenge. And then when you do get it, which it can be hard too. I mean, anybody that's done that form of music, you know what I'm talking about, You don't always get it the first time, especially in those older recording formats. Recording on a Fostex 4-track quarter-inch tape, you had to get it the first time. So did the drummer. So did the guitar player. We all had to play it simultaneously live together without making any mistakes. And at the time, it was a bitch. I'm not gonna lie, but we got it done. But as an older adult now, I really appreciate it because it sharpened the skills. And so now that I think sometimes I see people feeling pressure in that scenario because occasionally, you do record live still. And I feel like I don't necessarily experience as much of that, having been groomed up that route. So that's, I don't know, that brief explanation, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great. I've talked to you about these things before, and you mentioned your apartment and everything, and it kind of reminds me of Megadeth, Dave Mustaine, and talking to little Dave Ellefson, and about the apartment, and that's what it always reminds me of. I think one thing that you mentioned I wanted to touch on where you really did. Um, I wouldn't. I don't know how to how to say this. I'll just come out and say how important do you think that drugs were as far as influencing your musical style? You said that you did experiment, or maybe even more than experiment with like mind altering. Like I think weed is considered a mind expanding drug, and certainly LSD is. Do you think that had any influence on your musical development?
Yeah, it did. Excuse me. But more in an offhand way. So I would have never met Sean Young had I not had a joint in my hand walking down the hallway at Broad Ripple High School. And this cat was walking in front of me wearing a jean jacket with a giant Iron Maiden patch on the back. And I didn't want to smoke this thing by myself. So I went up and caught up with him and asked me if he wanted to go smoke out. And that's how we met one another. And it led, I mean, we still play together this day. So 33 years later, still writing music together. So, I mean, the connection part of it, to me, seemed to be very important. And, one of the crazy things is that, so we became buds, and our girlfriends were friends with each other. And we'd hang out at each other's houses and listen to music, smoke pot, drink beer, occasionally drop some acid. But back then we didn't have our musical instruments. We only knew we liked the music. And Sean would sit there and air drum or air guitar, anything playing. He would never stop doing this. We made fun of him for years about it. But the crazy thing is that when he bought his first drum kit, he could already play it. It was crazy. And within a week was really good, and has just kept growing like that on his instrument. And that really inspired me to get a bass. I think he had his kit about a month when I went and bought my first bass, but I'd been listening to him play. I'm like, man, how can you be that good out of the box? And when I'm looking back on it, though, it's because he had studied music mentally for so long and basically air drummed it or air guitared it to the point to where when he got his instrument, he could already play it. And I do, convey some of that to at least smoking pot. And, I'm not sure if everybody out there is a pot smoker, but it does open your mind a little bit. It does allow creative energies to come out. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but at least for us, it opened some doors. And, once that happened, we just ran with the ball, and it's led to a really beautiful music career. I wouldn't trade it for anything else, and also including our project with Alien Propulsion Technology and Rob LaRocca, man. It's a groundbreaker. We don't live in the same city. We trade files digitally, and yet we're able to still keep the chemistry and the sound together. And I'm not sure any of that would have happened, had we not experimented around with smoking a little pot and, really getting deep into the music. And, so I bet that's it on that one, really. I mean, that's where I think the drug culture brought us together. It was mind opening for everybody.
Somewhere maybe more of a shared cultural event. I was just kind of curious because I noticed you mentioned Pink Floyd as an influence, and I remember personally that Floyd was connected, strongly connected with hallucinogens and things like that. I was wondering if you could talk about you. You mentioned your influences. I was wondering if you would mind sort of just maybe chronologically um, describing your bass influences, talking a little about all the musicians who influenced you and why, and how it comprises your style as a player.
Well, great question. Great question. Ultimately, Pink Floyd was the first love for the kid. And definitely I did more than my fair share of LSD and listened to Pink Floyd. And, I'm not experienced or not before, but if you're into audio things, it really opened my mind. And I really probably credit it with, I do have the ability to tap into deep thoughts and write great lyrics and concepts, and have done that for most of the music projects I've been in. And that primarily comes back from listening to those early Pink Floyd albums and doing a little LSD, man. Just kind of opened my eyes up to the fact that you could really put together a broad message to people and try and be of an expansive nature to the mind doing that. And I really credit the influence of Pink Floyd was from my older brother, Christopher. He's the one that turned me on to Pink Floyd. As a matter of fact, he and my uncle waited for over 24 hours in a parking lot at Karma Records to get the tickets to the very first concert I ever went to, and it was Pink Floyd, Learning to Fly tour. And I'm not sure if anybody's ever familiar with that, but they brought a presentation that I still haven't seen anything like it. Lasers, oceans in the sky, flying beds, airplanes, bombs exploding, all in the Hoosier Dome. It was an unbelievable concert, and the sound quality was top notch. So, that really, once I saw that one, right about that time, I was discovering Iron Maiden as well, and had always listened to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, and then Rush. I would find myself walking home from work. Back in those days, I had a job in Broad Ripple, but we lived a couple miles south, and I was a child of a single mom, and she had 3 jobs. She couldn't give me a ride, so that was a walk. And we didn't have iPods or anything back then. I think they had the Walkman out, but I didn't have one. So I would hum songs on the way home. It might be Tom Sawyer. It might be Rhyme the Ancient Mariner. But that was what got me through some rather cold walks home. One time I walked home in an ice storm. It was like walking home on a sheet of ice. It took hours to get home. But those things would keep me warm inside and kind of gave me the passion, I suppose. So if you wanted to go in a chronological order of influence, I think Pink Floyd was the first one, with an interjection of Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, and then I discovered Iron Maiden, and with that, Rush also right about the same time, and another band called Yes that I don't really credit a whole lot, but it was all kind of geared around bands that had good bass guitar players. And the funny thing is the first love of my esteemed older brother Christopher was Black Sabbath, and he tuned me up to it. But it wasn't until later in life that I really absorbed Black Sabbath because it didn't seem complicated enough to me when I was young. But as I've gotten older, I see the brilliance of it, and that it doesn't necessarily need to be complicated. Um, so the grooviness of it, the absence of a note versus 10 notes can have more of an impact. And so I had to become a more mature individual to really absorb what Black Sabbath was handing out. And so it's a basic chronological order. These days, I listen to everything from country to rap to metal to. I really try and appreciate it all, and I do. It's all good. I watched "We Are the World" the other day, which was a USA for Africa, like a charity event video that was done back in the 80s. And, like Michael Jackson did the root tracks. Quincy Jones was the producer. I want to say the bass player. Oh, man, Marcus Jackson. Was it maybe Marcus Jackson? I just watched a documentary on this guy. Unbelievable player, though. And then, you got everybody from Kenny Rogers, Bob Dylan, Lionel Richie, who was the girl that had Big Lou Albano as her manager, Cyndi Lauper, Diana Ross, just all the musicians were involved in it. And I watched that thing and I'm like, man, like music's the one language everybody loves. No matter what your background is, when you hear something good, man, it'll give you the goosebumps. That's really how you know it's good, and it doesn't matter what type of music anybody's playing. If it makes your hair stand up, you know they really nailed their part.
Yeah, definitely. And something that occurred to me while you were saying that, and that's an excellent answer. Thank you for that. I wonder how could you compare? What do you think about maybe say Roger Waters versus Steve Harris versus Cliff Burton? Basically speaking.
Well, Roger Waters is definitely the plays a more simpler part on bass, but keep in mind also he carried a lot of vocals and just an unbelievable songwriter, man. And look, we're not going to leave David Gilmour out of it, though. Those guys would collaborated more than they would have I think. But Roger Waters is a bigger influence on me than anyone would ever guess, but probably a little more towards the lyrical side. Now, I have found recently from playing with Billy Lee and Soundtrack to My Demise that, the type of music he's writing, which is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It doesn't require real aggressive bass. So in that aspect, I draw a lot from the Pink Floyd influence because what we're doing is slightly psychedelic. So I tend to write more basic lines and try and fluidly, put them in and out of the mix almost subconsciously. And probably a lot of that is Pink Floyd influence. And as far as lyric writing, going to depth, definitely huge influence from Roger Waters. I even get criticized from time to time about some of the lyrics I write and that they're just to the common man or woman, not easily decipherable, but, so be it. That's just something I'm passionate about. And I really feel like it came from that influence. As far as Steve Harris on bass, that definitely propelled me into playing aggressively on the bass guitar and hitting the strings hard. And the other thing that I gathered from him was from watching his live performances was crisp and clean perfection. So I would see a Maiden show and then, for maybe 6 months afterwards, I'd be so dialed in on how crisp and clean I could be. And then I'd start slacking a little bit. And then I'd, not even knowing it, find myself maybe not playing quite as tight as I should be. And then another Maiden show would come around and I'd go see him and be like, oh shit, I suck. I better tighten my shit back up again. You know, when you see somebody play that good, it's very humbling, but it's also a good thing. You know, it kind of keeps you in place, especially when playing metal, man. It's fast as hell and ton of notes, especially playing fingers on bass. It's real easy to mess one up. You really have to concentrate and remind yourself that, hey, the note's got to be crisp and clean. It has to have a start and an end, and there has to be small amounts of space in between. And to achieve that, you concentrate to do it. So I think that's what I got from Steve Harris, and definitely my all-time favorite bass player. And then from Cliff Burton, I guess probably the thing I got from Cliff the most was that it's cool to use the same chords you might use in classical music, and you can interweave those into metal music and make it incredibly interesting and really set your guitar player up for some beautiful music to play over, and the passion also with Cliff, man. He just, when he got that much energy and passion into it, and I don't think I've ever hit the mark as to what he was doing, but I'm always trying, especially with live performance, man. I always kind of go into it with that mentality, like, hey, man, if Cliff were here, he'd be throwing down as hard as he could tonight. So no matter how I'm feeling live, or if the sound's not all that great, I still have to go out there and deliver a passionate performance. So you named off three of my favorite bassists of all time. I appreciate that question. That was a good one.
Oh, great! I'm glad it worked. It worked out. You say three of your favorites. Who did we miss? Who are some other influences? Would you care to talk about that a little bit?
Well, instantly go to Geddy Lee, John Paul Jones, and Geezer Butler. So that'd be Rush, Led Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath. And then Noel Redding, if I remember correctly, was the bass player on a couple Hendrix albums that I was really digging, and got me into that style of music, which Justin Lynch was really good at playing Hendrix and that style of free rock and using, lots of effects and wah-wah pedal and all that stuff. So, if I was going to have to name off any other three, that'd probably be it, Probably the most underrated of them all, though, if you want to get down to it, is John Paul Jones. If you've ever listened to Led Zeppelin, listen to the bass. Just phenomenal lines. So I draw on that influence a lot these days because I'm in multiple projects, and one of them's a rock project, and the other is like in a kind of a acoustic folk rock project for say. But bouncing around on a chord on bass to the beat of the drums really provides a nice foundation in rock music. And I think John Paul Jones, there were lots of guys that did it, but I feel like he really delivered it in a method that to me, it communicated well to me. And so I basically try and duplicate that. I don't try and play identical riffs or anything, but if I'm presented with a chord structure from a guitar player and a beat from a drummer, and I feel like we're in that rock format, I definitely draw on that influence. And when I write the part, I try and mimic it to a certain degree because it's pleasurable to the ear. Geezer Butler hits the strings hard. I love that. I do too. And probably got a lot of that from him. And, I will occasionally use a little bit of distortion or overdrive on the bass to try and mimic that type of sound that he got. So that's that. Where else were we? What were we? Geddy Lee? Who was the other? I don't even remember where we're at.
I think Geddy Lee was in there for sure. Yeah.
Well, I can say enough about Geddy Lee, man. He's playing three instruments and singing at the same time. But With him, I really feel like probably he has a technique for rolling off notes and how to play a complicated part without being complicated. So there was a time at playing bass where I was having some problems with my hands, um, type of carpal tunnel, to where I didn't necessarily have the speed and range of motion that I had when I was a younger man, and I struggled with it for a while. And then I was watching a Rush video one day, and I'm looking at Geddy Lee, and he just was using one finger. It was a pretty fast part. He was just wobbling on the string just right. And I was like, man, I do that sometimes. I thought it wasn't cool at the time. I was like, oh, I'm cheating. But I'm like, man, if Geddy Lee's doing it, it must be okay. And then so I started watching other videos of bass players, and they're doing stuff like flicking 3-string chords. I'm like, man, I do that at home. I just I didn't really think it was all that cool or acceptable. And be honest with you, I don't know that my bandmates thought it was all that cool either, but it kind of gave me the confidence to, hey man, what is, as long as you're delivering the part and it sounds great, it really doesn't matter if you used 4 fingers to thump out that part real quick, or if you just doubled up on 2, so long as you're delivering the part in the maximum level of perfection and audioly. And it's caused me to play a lot different. I play way different now. I almost lead with my right hand, my thumping hand. I lead with my third finger, to be honest with you. And since I started doing that, it actually has allowed me to get back a lot of that speed and technique that it kind of was elusive there for a little bit. So I'm very, very fortunate to have those influences, and it was a learning curve, but happy to have went through it. I think it's just part of getting a little bit older as a musician, and you look for more efficient ways to do things.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned specifically related to metal that there was a challenge inherent with that type of music. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about that. How important is the challenge aspect of it? And what's the mentality when you approach that type of thing?
Well, Rob, that's why I love playing metal music. I hear people playing types of jazz and even some bluegrass, and I can hear it. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so difficult to play. But for me, it's the metal, and the challenge is everything. It really is. When you go to learn a song, it's going to take a while. There's a lot to hear. When you get a Rob LaRocca track, uh, are the riffs super complicated? No, but the movements. If you want to really nail the song, it's going to be an adventure. And when it comes time to record that song, you better be bringing your A+ game. It's not going to be easy. And subsequently, when you do nail it, it's a sense of accomplishment that is, I don't know how to describe how rewarding it is. I call it Olympic music. It's like trying out for the Olympics. You got to get a gold medal if you want to make the team. And whether you're playing the song live that night as part of your performance, or whether you're rehearsing at home, where that's where most of the work happens, is at home by yourself, or whether you're in the studio with the band, going into it that you have to deliver a gold medal performance. Nothing short of that is going to work. And so, and it's intimidating as hell, man. There are days where you're like, man, God, I don't even know if I got it today, but all you got to do is put the headphones on or click the amp on and get started. And if you're not warmed up, it might be a little rough at first, whatever. But once you get into it, the mind starts taking over, and you find yourself engaged in this epic battle of, can I nail this song. I worked so hard on it, spent a lot of time writing the part and going through the different uh, uh, parts that I'm going to play for it, and the different what register should I be in at this specific time of the song. You know, a lot of that comes into play these days. You know, we've advanced a little bit, and with the songwriting, you identify where the guitar's at and what the drums are doing as to what register you might want to be in on bass. But it's the challenge, man. It's what really makes metal the preferred music that I would like to play, because of the challenge. You know, you got to nail it, and it's not easy. And so when you come out of it, when you do nail it, you feel a really great sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think it's interesting that you mention the metaphor of sports, when you know performance. Basically, I did want to check with you and make sure that I'm perceiving your vibe correctly. That you said you were in a very structured environment for a long time, playing trumpet in maybe like grade school, middle school, high school bands. So there's a lot of structure in that. How much do you think that translates into, say, a rock or metal environment?
Well, definitely it does. And that's something that you rely on your fellow bandmates for. I think everybody derives said structure from maybe different roots. For me, initially, it was sports and athletics. You know, primarily baseball. You know, we were raised by a single mom. We were poor as hell, but I kid you not, man. Our mom made sure we played baseball every year, and we loved it. It was so awesome. I think I played baseball for 12 years. I eventually got to a high school level where I couldn't make the team anymore, but you know, so be it. You know, it was a ton of fun. You know, played football quite a few years. Made the basketball team a couple years. Our mom's second husband, Kurt, he showed us tennis. I learned tennis when I was 9 years old. I still play tennis. It's the best form of exercise I can imagine. So, you know, for me, the structure and mental toughness I think that you maybe need as a musician originally came from athletics. And then as I got involved in the music, you know, I found parallels and was like, you know, this is really the same thing. It's just a different type of game, for say. Um, and to this day, you know, I at least personally would like to pride myself on that. That's maybe one of the things I bring to a project is the mental toughness and dedication, and you know, being on time, being reliable. Uh, you know, all those things play a huge role in being a band. I will say this: I've been blessed with bandmates that also feel that way, and not all of them were athletes. Not all of them had a background coming up playing music through school, but one way or the other had the appreciation for the level of dedication and amount of time you're going to have to put into something to make it successful. And yet yourself included, really. I mean, if you look at the timeline on this current project, Alien Propulsion Technology, we really started hatching this idea back in like, I don't know, 2015. And we just have kept talking about it. And, you know, a lot of people would be like, oh, it's moving forward so slow. But given the consideration, hell, we hadn't seen each other physically for 15 years and we're communicating over a phone and through emails, we were able to dial this thing in. And, you know, the future for the project is just amazingly bright. The chemistry's there. You know, we went through the first phase of recording and mixing and mastering, and it just came out dynamite. You know, probably the biggest thing holding us back is money. You know, that's probably the case with a lot of people's project, but you know, I feel like with this one, all the other pieces are in place. You know, including that mental toughness that it takes to be able to do something like this, you know. So I feel fortunate, man. You know, I had a decent enough upcoming that I learned it, but I'm also surrounded by tremendous musicians that have that same mentality, and that's where I'm blessed on this one.
Okay, yeah, definitely. That's a great answer to that question. I appreciate it, and you. I guess it's time that we need to get into the exploration, a little bit of alien propulsion technology, and that's somewhat why we're here. But it's better to understand you as a person, I think, before we talk of APT. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the concept of APT, how it developed, what it means to you in your mind, and how it relates, what you're doing musically to express your ideas in the band.
Wow, great question, Rob. Well, alien propulsion technology. Uh, I got that term from basically a thing called the Disclosure Project. There were uh, several people came forward near the end of their lives, and they had been either like air traffic controllers or uh, 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 people that watched nuclear missile silos. One guy was the Canadian Minister of Defense. Another guy was the head of NORAD, was like North American. And I forget the whole deal, but I was listening to what these guys were saying, and man, they were saying some far out stuff. It wasn't even believable. But what occurred to me is that enough people had come forward. I was like, man, why would these people discredit themselves at the end of their life and their family uh, to tell these fantastic tales? So to me, that gave it a ring of truth. So I started investigating further, and there came out story that hey, extraterrestrial spacecraft crashed here, and we back engineered the technology and so forth. And there's plenty of chatter on that, and I'm not asking anybody to believe it or not, but that kind of spawned the term. I think I heard it one time, and I was like, alien propulsion technology. And in the back of my mind, I was like, man, that's what we need to get off this rock. We need to be traveling among the stars. So yeah, how do we get a hold of some of this alien propulsion technology? I want to be a part of it. So I've continued to watch and listen, and it's in the mind of most people, it's a pretty far fetched topic. So I'm not asking anybody to believe it. I will say that no matter who you are, you'll probably at least find it incredibly interesting to listen to and think about. And that's what really spawned the concept. So I know that when you and I, first started talking about getting a project going back in 2015, we were really trying to finish up the Third Ancestor album that, because Denny had passed away during that process, and it never fully got completed. Didn't have any base to it, and so that kind of got the ball rolling. And at the time, we were having conversations about these individuals that had come forward with their stories, and just kind of branched off from there. And I think at one point that name popped up, Alien Propulsion Technology, and I'm pretty sure we were simultaneously like, "Hey, that's the band name. That's perfect," and because it does give a very broad spectrum of things to talk about. And basically, anything can fall under the umbrella of alien propulsion technology, whether it be folklore, whether it be fantasy, whether it be sci-fi. It's mind expansive material, and so that's kind of where that started. And I remember getting a track in an email called Morpheus Mortem 9. I had no idea where that title came from, but I looked at the words, and I was like, it inspired to me a concept about a prison planet at the very filthy end of the universe, rotating around a neutron star, and once you got there, you can never leave. And sleep. Eventually, you're getting put to sleep as a prisoner there, and that's how we kind of developed that concept. And that's really the next coming after we're done with the Dream Witch. I mean, the listener, you guys don't know this yet, but that's where we're going with the project. When we finish up Folklore, it's going to go to more of a sci-fi concept with Morpheus Mortem 9 and a couple other songs that are already written. It's just a matter of getting them recorded, and financially that can be challenging. That's our biggest holdup. But concept wise, that's pretty much where all that came from. Really, just if you want to dig into it, Stephen Greer is the name of the doctor that started the thing. It's called the Disclosure Project, and there's like 8 hours of witness testimony on this stuff, and it's just hard for me to believe that all these people are lying. They're very highly accredited people, so it's worth taking a look at. Once again, not asking you to believe it, but it'll get your mind rolling anyhow.
Yeah, definitely. And so I was curious when you mentioned all these different ideas. It's a lot. Is there a specific who did you mention again? Are there some people, like if people were interested in actually exploring the title, are there maybe a few people or a few videos on YouTube if they wanted to go check it out? That might be an easy start into that.
Yeah, the witness accounts is where you're going to want to go. And the one thing I would say about that is you cannot discount human testimony. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to, you would throw the Bible or the Quran or all that out of works. That's all human testimony. And what we have here is a more modern version of it, of people that were sworn under oath that came forward very late in their lives. A lot of them, at that point were either diagnosed with some sort of cancer or stuff. And you could tell they're only coming forth because they know it's over. And, they're like, man, I just can't keep the secret anymore. I have to tell somebody. And to be honest with you, the American people or the human people or our species in general deserves to know. It's part of your heritage, So that's how it's portrayed. Some of it's pretty far-fetched. Some of it's not all that far-fetched. Some of it has a lot of evidence backing it up. Some of it has none. So, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt. But if I were going to steer anybody in one direction, I would say what you would want to do is look at Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project and specifically go to the witness accounts. It's about 8 hours. It's not easy to watch, man. It's old dudes that, had high clearance in the government and are very highly accredited, and it's all backed up. They actually testify in front of the Senate. And that video itself is over 4 hours long. So, check it out, see what you think. My gut feeling is not all of them are lying. There is some truth in there. And, if you look at ancient religions, there's some evidence there as well that there's been visitations. And, for me, I find that incredibly interesting, man. I think that ultimately for the human species, our destiny is to travel among the stars. And I'd like to see it happen in my lifetime. So anything that comes up in that realm of thinking or knowledge, I'm at least going to have a look at it, and hope that eventually we can fulfill that destiny.
Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds like a goal, definitely to shoot for that. And I was wondering if you could also talk about, speaking of alien propulsion technology, I was wondering if you could talk about the bass and drum tracking that you and Sean Young did at Azimuth Studios. Interesting name, Azimuth. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, maybe some of the challenges that you might have faced or some of the opportunities for expression. How was that session? Just anything you want to say about that.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, man. What are the chances of we searched out some studios to work out of, and we come up with one called Azimuth. And then Ryan and Carrie were absolutely tremendous to work with. We've been carrying Sean's Prestige Session Select 9-piece drum kit by Pearl for about 22 years now. It's a big kit. Anytime we ever bring it to a live performance or a studio, generally there's some sort of issue. But in this case, we brought it to Azimuth, and man, they were all over it. They were actually excited to see that big kit, and they had an intern there with them, and they had this drum kit mic'd up in 12 minutes. Sean and I just talked about it the other day, how amazing it was, and the sound was good. And within a few tweaks and goes, they were ready to go. So, that's the one thing I'd like to initially come off with there is how good of an experience it was in the studio. Now, we were fortunate that you came down, Rob LaRocca flew in from Austin. I believe you were in Austin at that time. Maybe not, though. Yeah, you were still in Austin then. Yeah, you were in Austin. Flew out and were with us through the whole thing. But effectively about, 6-8 weeks before that, we got the demo tracks for Gorilla Wolf. And, Sean and I have been playing together for, it's 32, we're on our 32nd year now. So, it came to us pretty quick, but the more we got into it, we found that there actually was more there than, just the initial ear listening would give you, and so we kept dialing it in. And then I want to say we sent a couple tracks back, and we were a little ahead of tempo, and we really didn't do a good job of accounting for that, because when we got to the studio to record, we were still ahead of tempo. And it cost us when we did the tracks. We could not keep the interlude in time with the metronome, so we had to rewrite our parts. We had overwritten the part, and now that's we have not recorded. At least Sean and I have, and I've done some on other projects, but not a lot. But at least with him and I, very little work with the metronome. So we quickly found out that we had, basically made a mistake, and we had to correct it right then and there on the spot with everybody looking. Not only do we have our songwriter and esteemed guitar player, Rob, beaming down on us, but we got both engineers, and Sean's whole family was there. So pressure was on. But the kids delivered with the goods. And that's one of the things that made me really proud to be, a musician with Sean Young for this long, is that I know for a fact he hates that sort of scenario. But as if any great soldier, he toughened. He went to mental toughness, and he put it together in his mind and was like, nope, I got it. We're going to do it. And we did it, and that, I think, really sealed the deal for alien propulsion technology. We had a major roadblock, and we said, nope, we're not going to let this stop us. We're going to do it. And to Rob LaRocca's credit, we still came in over tempo, and he was able to take those tracks and go record to them by himself with just the engineer, whom really developed a relationship over just a couple days, and that was at Congress House in Austin, and then take the whole thing down to Morrisound, do the vocals and the mix and the master, so that whole experience there and the whole thing being recorded remote, I feel like it matured us and elevated us. And that's one of the things that makes alien propulsion technology a really great and unique project, is that we have had that experience together. And, I encourage people to try it, playing remotely like that and writing and not being even in the same state and all that. Um, but it's going to come with its challenges, especially with metal already being challenging to play to begin with. It's a pretty fast and advanced form of music, lots of notes. But don't let it discourage you. Put your time in and get it done, and it will elevate you as a musician.
Yeah, definitely. So if you guys record again, do you imagine
Yeah, we're going
yourselves
to go back to
tracking at
Azimuth.
Azimuth again?
Sorry about that. I came in a little quick. I think by rules I was supposed to wait a couple seconds, but so if you need to edit that out, that's cool. Yeah, we're definitely going back to Azimuth for rhythm tracks on the Dream Witch. They did a tremendous job there, and we're going to come in more prepared this time as well, especially when it comes to tempo. We did have to learn that lesson, but I think ultimately we're going to want to take the whole thing down to Morris Sound. They really did a great job with mix master, and I know from talking with Rob, there's a comfort level and an expertise down there. Um, you know, so I think ultimately, yeah, we're going to keep working with Ryan and Carrie at Azimuth because they do a tremendous job. But we eventually do want all of the musicians in the same room, uh, or at least within eye contact and isolation, recording together to totally capture the live energy that we can do. So that's just a part of the challenges, man, of doing this format where we're in different locations. And but you keep that overall goal in mind. And we're just real fortunate, man, to be working with these tremendous sound engineers here in Indianapolis at Azimuth Studios, and your experience in Austin, Texas at Congress House was great. And then, of course, working with Morris Sound down there in Tampa, they're for the metal music really considered to be top of the game, and really proud to be working, with these individuals.
Yeah, they are very talented people for sure. When speaking of alien propulsion technology and recording and everything, what do you see as the timeline? Are you imagine? I know Dream Witch is next. What else is on the horizon for good old APT?
Well, you nailed it right there. The second part of Folklore, part two, the Dream Witch, is the next single that's up. And that's to be recorded this spring. And that really puts us pretty much in the next 4 weeks. We've had some setbacks with the quarantine and all that, but we're going to get in there. And it may very well happen that we record at home, too. We do have equipment to do that. We just, neither of us are all that great as sound engineers, but we do have Scott Bronner, our guitar player, Mercy Kill, inspired to set up his gear over at Sean's, and that may lead to us actually doing the tracks there. We'll see, but we're looking. It was initially going to be March, April, May. We're ready to record now. We've been playing the song for months. Rob sent us a really good demo track, and the crazy thing enough was he had made some adjustments to the demo track, and we had already made the same adjustments. It's just one of those that leaves your mind going, you know what, it's meant to be. So it's exactly how we were playing it. We were playing a little quick, we always come in a little fast, so we've got to adjust our tempo. So the Dream Witch is the next up, and that's going to be the not the B side, but song 2. We got 2 songs we're doing under a concept called Folklore, and that's really a prequel to what's to come for alien propulsion technology. The main saga is a concept that we have that's called Morpheus Mortem 9. And we had talked a little bit about this earlier, and then even in the debut podcast. But it's really a sci-fi concept, and it leans itself a little more to the name alien propulsion technology, where we're trying to explain some things and also, tell an elaborate story that's captivating to the mind and fun to think about and expansive to one's consciousness. And that's part of the concept. And I think if you get down to the deep root of what is alien propulsion technology about, it's really about expanding your mind and think about the things that people tell you not to think about. Give it some thought. Let your mind expand. I mean, the universe is potentially infinite. And probably anything you can think of is out there somewhere. So think it up. Let your mind wander and go free. Feel free to write down your ideas, develop them into poems, songs, even to music if you so desire. It's a form of art, and it's a great conduit for the release of anyone's creative energies.
Nice. I like that. Very, very positive message there. Appreciate that. And I guess I feel pretty good about everything that we've said so far. Is there anything that I might have missed that you'd like to touch on?
Not really, man. Rob, I really appreciate you having me on the show today. It's been an honor, and always great talking to you, man. Our chemistry's good. We could do this for hours. I would like to say something to my fellow members of the human species out there. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. Stay as positive as possible. Use this time to rally around your family and also any creative energies you have put out, whether you like painting, drawing, cooking, fishing, writing music, whatever it is, man. This is a great time to do it. And we really appreciate you being our listener. And we're really excited about getting these songs out there to you. I know it's taken a while, but we are operating at a great distance from one another. And we do have financial constraints. I'm sure everybody can understand that. But we're going to get them out there to you. And as you see the concept grow, you'll find that it is like a novel. And in the long run, I do foresee that as a goal. And indeed, we probably are going to follow up this musical material with a type of graphic novels and really kind of take music and songwriting and metal into a direction that maybe has not necessarily been pursued before. And I encourage all of you to do the same. Let your creative energies run free. It's really good for the mind, heart, and soul. And that's really what this is all about. And thank you for having me on tonight. It's been a true pleasure.
I appreciate that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, dudes and dudettes. It's Larry Langley, the bassist extraordinaire, apex predator, master of disaster on the low sonic end, the BASSASSIN himself. Thank you, Larry, so much for your time and your input and expertise. Very much appreciated, sir.